Have you ever wondered why some diseases seem to appear out of nowhere, while others are always present in certain areas? Well, the answer lies in the fascinating world of epidemiology. This field, often considered the backbone of public health, is all about understanding the who, what, where, when, and why of disease patterns in populations. Disease isn't random. It follows patterns and trends influenced by factors like our genetics, our behaviors, and even the environments we live in. Epidemiology is the detective work that deciphers these patterns, providing vital clues on how to control and prevent diseases. Now, imagine a world without epidemiology. It'd be like trying to solve a puzzle blindfolded. We wouldn't know how diseases spread, who is most at risk, or how to stop an outbreak. We would be left in the dark, and in the world of public health, knowledge is power. It's the key to saving lives and improving health on a global scale. In this video, we'll be exploring several key terms in epidemiology. We'll start with sporadic disease, those seemingly random cases that pop up here and there without any apparent pattern. Then we'll move on to endemic diseases, the ones that have made themselves at home in certain regions. From there, we'll discuss outbreaks, those sudden increases in disease cases that can send public health officials scrambling. And of course, we can't forget about epidemics and pandemics, terms that have been on everyone's lips in recent years. These are large-scale outbreaks that can spread across countries, continents, and even the entire globe. These terms might sound complex, but don't worry, we'll break them down to their essentials. By the end of this video, you'll not only know what these words mean, but you'll also understand the crucial role they play in our ongoing battle against disease. So, ready to become a detective in the world of public health? Excellent. Now let's dive deeper into these terms and understand what each one truly means. First up is sporadic disease, a term you might not hear often but is a part of our daily lives. What do we mean when we say sporadic disease? Simply put, these are diseases that occur in a population at a low and often irregular frequency. They're not tied to a specific location or time, and rather than being widespread, they tend to appear in random, isolated instances. So what are some examples of sporadic diseases? Think about conditions like tetanus and rabies. These diseases don't typically circulate within communities in a constant manner. Instead, they pop up here and there, often in unexpected places. You might hear about a case of tetanus in a city one day, then another case in a rural town a few weeks later. Or you might learn about a rabies case in a dog in one part of the country, only to hear about a human case in a completely different region later on. Now, one of the key characteristics of sporadic diseases is their unpredictability. Because these diseases don't follow a regular pattern, it can be challenging to anticipate when and where they'll appear next. This can make them particularly difficult to control, as we can't always predict who will be at risk of contracting them. But it's not all doom and gloom. The sporadic nature of these diseases means that they don't usually cause widespread outbreaks or epidemics. Instead, they tend to cause isolated cases or small clusters of disease. However, this doesn't mean we can afford to be complacent. Even though sporadic diseases might not make the headlines as often as epidemics or pandemics, they still pose a significant threat to public health. That's why it's crucial to maintain constant vigilance and take preventive measures, such as getting vaccinated and practicing good hygiene, to protect ourselves and our communities from these diseases. Sporadic diseases, although unpredictable, remind us of the importance of constant vigilance in disease prevention. Shifting gears, we now move to endemic diseases. Ever wondered why some diseases are always present in certain areas? Well, let's dive into the fascinating world of endemics. An endemic disease is one that maintains a steady presence within a geographic location. It's like that one guest at the party who's always there, regardless of the time or occasion. These diseases have found a comfortable spot in specific areas and have made themselves at home. The characteristics of endemic diseases are quite intriguing. They are typically confined to a particular region and maintain a relatively constant level of prevalence. This doesn't mean that everyone in the area is always sick. Instead, It means there's a predictable number of cases that public health officials can expect to see in that region over a given period. Now let's look at some examples. Malaria in Africa is a classic case of an endemic disease. Despite global efforts to eradicate it, malaria continues to be a major health issue in many parts of Africa. The disease has become so ingrained in these regions that it's considered a part of the local landscape. But why are these diseases endemic to certain areas? Factors like climate, population density, and local health practices can all play a part. For instance, the warm, humid climate and dense population in some parts of Africa create an ideal breeding ground for the mosquitoes that spread malaria. Endemic diseases aren't just restricted to developing countries or tropical regions, though. Lyme disease is endemic to certain areas of North America and Europe, showing that these diseases can set up shop anywhere that conditions are right. So, while we may think of diseases as fleeting or temporary, endemic diseases tell a different story. They remind us that diseases can become a constant part of a region's landscape, persisting year after year, generation after generation. Endemic diseases, while restricted to certain areas, pose a constant threat to those living there. They require ongoing efforts from public health officials and communities to keep them in check and protect the people they affect. It's a constant dance with a persistent partner, a dance that shapes the health and lives of millions around the world. Moving on, have you ever heard about an outbreak and wondered what exactly that means? Well, let's demystify it. An outbreak, in the realm of epidemiology, is a term used to describe a sudden increase in the number of cases of a disease beyond what is normally expected in a specific geographic area. It's like a sudden, unwelcome party of germs that no one asked for. Now, this isn't to be confused with epidemics or pandemics. Outbreaks are usually confined to a limited area. Think of a small town or even a single community. They are more localized, and while they can certainly be severe, they typically don't have the far-reaching implications of an epidemic or a pandemic. One of the most well-known examples of an outbreak was the E. coli outbreak that occurred in the United States in the late 90s. The culprit? Contaminated hamburger meat. In this case, a normally harmless bacterium found in the digestive tract of humans and animals became a dangerous pathogen. It led to severe illness in over 500 people centered around the Pacific Northwest. This is a classic example of an outbreak, a sudden surge in cases, localized to a specific area. But here's the thing about outbreaks. They're not just about the numbers. They're a wake-up call, a reminder of our vulnerabilities in the face of disease. Outbreaks highlight the importance of public health measures, of surveillance, of rapid response. They underline the need for us to stay vigilant, to keep our guard up, to ensure that a small outbreak doesn't escalate into a full-blown epidemic. So, the next time you hear about an outbreak, remember it's more than just a statistic on the news. It's a signal for us to step up, to take action to prevent further spread. And most importantly, it's a testament to the power of diseases, but also to our potential to combat them if we stay alert, informed, and prepared. Outbreaks remind us that diseases can escalate quickly if not controlled effectively. Ever found yourself confused between an epidemic and a pandemic? You're not alone. These terms are often thrown around interchangeably, but they have distinct meanings in the field of epidemiology. Let's start by exploring the concept of an epidemic. An epidemic refers to a sudden increase in the number of cases of a disease above what is normally expected in a particular population in a defined geographical area. Think of it as a disease's sudden but localized popularity contest. It's when a disease decides to throw a loud party in your town and invites way too many guests. For instance, the Zika virus, which was primarily confined to a specific region in Brazil in 2015, was an epidemic. It caused widespread illness within that community, but was largely contained within that geographic area. Now let's shift gears and talk about a pandemic. If an epidemic is a local disease party, a pandemic is when the disease decides to take its show on the road, crossing borders and oceans. A pandemic is an epidemic that has spread over several countries or continents, usually affecting a large number of people. It's the global version of an epidemic. The COVID-19 outbreak that began in 2019 is a prime example of a pandemic. Starting in one region of China, the disease quickly spread across the globe, affecting millions of people in many different countries. The widespread nature and the high number of cases worldwide is what elevated the COVID-19 situation from an epidemic to a pandemic status. So you might ask, what's the point of differentiating between these two terms? Well, it's all about understanding the scale and scope of a disease's spread. An epidemic is more confined and can often be controlled with targeted interventions in a specific region. On the other hand, managing a pandemic requires global cooperation and resources because the disease has spread far and wide. In both cases, understanding whether we're dealing with an epidemic or a pandemic helps public health officials determine the necessary steps to control the disease. It informs the strategies for disease control, the allocation of resources, and the urgency of response. In a nutshell, an epidemic is a disease occurrence that is higher than expected within a particular community or region. In contrast, a pandemic is an epidemic that has gone global. It's like comparing a local music concert to a world tour. Both are significant, but the scale and the response required are vastly different. Understanding the difference between an epidemic and a pandemic helps us grasp the scale of the disease spread. And in the world of disease control and prevention, that understanding can make all the difference in our fight against these unwelcome guests. So, we've covered a lot of ground today. Let's recap. We started with epidemiology, the scientific discipline that studies how diseases spread and affect populations. It's the cornerstone that guides public health decisions, from policy making to disease prevention. It's like being a detective, but instead of solving a crime, we're chasing down the causes and effects of diseases. We then delved into sporadic diseases. These are illnesses that occur infrequently and irregularly. They're the lone wolves of the disease world, appearing without any clear patterns or trends. They could be genetic, like Huntington's disease, or environmental, like the occasional case of Lyme disease. Next, we unpacked the concept of endemic diseases. These are the diseases that have made themselves at home in certain regions or populations. They're always present, but they're usually at low, constant levels. Think of malaria in Africa or Lyme disease in the northeastern United States. We then discussed outbreaks, the sudden increase in the number of cases of a particular disease. Outbreaks are like unexpected guests. They can happen anywhere and can quickly become overwhelming. They can be localized, like a food poisoning event, at a single restaurant, or they can affect a larger area, like a flu outbreak in a city. Finally, we distinguished between epidemics and pandemics. An epidemic is when a disease spreads rapidly to a lot of people in a given population or region. It's like a wildfire, spreading quickly and causing a lot of damage. A pandemic, on the other hand, is an epidemic that's gone global. It's a disease outbreak that affects multiple countries or continents, like the COVID-19 pandemic we're currently battling. Understanding these patterns and terms in epidemiology is crucial in our fight against diseases. Remember, knowledge is power, and in this case, it's the power to save lives.